Hey folks, as you know from other games I've covered in the past on this channel, I'm quite the fan of overhead arcade races, and whilst there are many that got released on the 8 and 16-bit home computers, there are others which don't really get talked about as often compared to the more iconic games. For me, this week's game Indy Heat just happens to be one of those titles. Originally brought into the arcades by Leland in 1991, it got a home release the following year on the C64, the Amiga, and Atari ST, published by Storm. That C64 version in particular was the release I was most familiar with, primarily because I spent a lot of time with a single track demo that appeared on an issue of Commodore format. Besides that, I had some relatives who also had a copy of the Amiga version, and I played that quite a few times as well. And as luck would have it, I've actually got both of those versions in my collection, so let's go take a comparison run between both. We'll start with the C64 version. For such a late release, you can say the presentation's a little sparse. Prior to starting a game, you can configure a few options. Firstly, you can set the control method. Next up, you can toggle between music and sound effects. Finally, you can toggle the multi-load, which sounds a bit curious, but actually has a bit of good use. The game keeps 2 tracks in memory, the last 2 that you've raced on. So if you turn the multi-load off, you could play a game racing just on those 2 tracks, in fact creating a practice mode. Prior to each race, you have the opportunity to purchase various vehicle upgrades from Pit Lane. These range from turbos, which offer a short boost of speed, brakes and tyres, which improve your car's handling. You can increase the speed of your pit crew to shave seconds off your refueling stops, improve your car's MPG rating for better fuel efficiency, then finally, you can upgrade the engine to improve your top speed. If at any point you're not sure which of these you should install, you can also let the computer take the reins and install whatever it thinks you need. Then you're on to the first of 11 races. Unlike the other versions, here you see a brief preview of the course, if a little blocky, and the number of laps which the race will last for. Then it's go. Each of these tracks is based on a real US circuit, though compressed onto a single screen. As you expect for a more serious attempt at an arcade racer, it's less about the obstacles on the road, and more about avoiding the walls, your opponents, and your ever-dwindling fuel supply. Which leads us to the major addition to the game, and those are pit stops. When your fuel level gets critical, as indicated by the little fuel bar at the bottom of the screen, your pit stop will start blinking, and you'll get a little pit-in notification in your status area. Your pit stops are automatic, so all you need to do is drive into your spot and take a quick breather as the crew refuel and repair any damage you've got. That's right, damage. If you're a little too clumsy around the course, or you couldn't get clearly past some opponents, you need to come in for repairs. And you have to do this quick, because when you're damaged, you'll plot around the track, giving your opponents ample opportunity to leave you breathing in their fumes. But pit stops also open an opportunity for a little deviousness, as you can disrupt your opponent's stops from a not so friendly nudge as you pass them by. If you pull it off, it forces them out of their pit, meaning they're going to have to waste time to do another lap before they come in and refuel or repair again. But that also gives you another chance to take the lead. Winning races just isn't about devious driving. You need to be good with the racing line, and you also have to be careful about which upgrades you choose to install. If you're beaten by any of the AI drivers, you lose one of your 3 credits. Like most home conversions of this era, that's all you have. You can't insert coin to get more. So lose them all, and it's game over. Which leads me on to a bit of the challenge. I found racing my way through the season quite difficult at times on the C64 version. It might just be down to my skills, and they could be lacking, and that's quite a reasonable thing. The cars, for me, felt a little too large for the tracks. So it meant it's harder at times to get around the opponents, and it's harder to make some of the corners because your turning speed by default feels really slow. Maybe that means you just need to put more into the tyre upgrades, I'm not sure, but it just felt a little tricky to navigate successfully. But that's enough with the C64 version. Let's switch over to the Amiga version and see how it feels on the 16 bits. Right off the bat, I have to say that the presentation rocks with the Amiga version, but you could probably say the same as you hear the intro music kicking in. This time round, it's more of your traditional track mode, cycling between the title screen and a secondary screen which contains descriptions of the upgrades and the option keys, replacing the option screen from the C64 version. Now with the pre-game screen, the first big addition is that now there's 3 players, not just 2. This third player is controllable with the keyboard, which may or may not be a positive depending on how you prefer to play. Now, unlike the C64 version, and close to the arcade game, the next course preview is actually in the top corner of the screen here. I'm not a big fan of this, even though it's more accurate, because you can't see as much detail on the track. The other detail I really love here is that if you get beaten by the AI and use a credit to continue, you actually get additional money to spend before the next race. It helps even the slate just a little bit against the AI drivers over time. As we go to start our first race, we can see that with the third player added to the game, there's a little degree of UI reshuffling. This really only affects how the turbos are managed, though this change brings them into line with the arcade version. Now, on the C64 version, the little bar on the bottom of the screen showed your total amount. As you bought them pre-game, you sort of added up to the bank, and this was available all the time. Here on the Amiga version, and in the arcade game, your car can only hold a limited number of that bank until you refuel. As you go to refuel, you also refill your turbo supply. Next up, there's a big jump visually as the course graphics look a lot closer to those in the arcade game. There's an element of depth to them, and you can sort of see this here where you see banked corners on courses, there's racing line marked out, and there's a lot more detail in the scenery on the side of the track. Most importantly for playability though, is the voice cues when you need to pit. When you're frantically racing around and you need to refuel, rather than judging the indicators on the screen, the pit bay, the little flags which are added here, as well as the indicator on your status panel, you can solely rely on hearing red, pit. And that's a far better indicator because you don't have to take your eyes off the road. And in a game like this, that's enough to just distract you and you can cause an accident or a mistake. Most importantly though, I feel the car handling is a lot tighter here. Now on the C64 version, it felt, like I said, it felt really sluggish to turn. Maybe you need to put a lot more into the upgrades, I don't know. But out of the box on the Amiga one, the car handling is a lot tighter and it's easy to complete some of those courses. You still need to be upgrading your handling for later races, but it's not as problematic as it is on the 64 version. Consequently, I found myself far more competitive here. I was able to get a lot further in the game for the purposes of recording this footage as a result. So it felt a lot more enjoyable to me because I could do that. So, at this point, it sounds like a bit of an easy conclusion, right? Actually, I'm not so sure. I don't think it's really the case because on the C64, despite the handling being a little off, I still think it's a solid racer and it's still good fun to play. Especially if you can rope in a friend, put it in 2-player mode, maybe find a cracked version and turn a infinite continuous cheat on, and enjoy it for what it is. It's still a fun game you can sit there and enjoy. Now, on the Amiga, I think it's a much better experience, especially in single player, because the improved handling and some of the other little improvements to the game make it a lot more fun and fairer in single player. But, because you've got a 3-player multiplayer mode, rope in 2 more friends, play it like that, you're going to have a lot more fun with it. And with that, thanks again for watching this review. As always, if you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a thumbs up or a comment. These really do help with getting the videos in front of more people. If you're after more, you can always check out some of the links you'll see at the end, or hit the subscribe button, which is also in the description, to catch new videos as I release them, which tend to be weekly. Finally, if you're a fan of the channel and you want to see me do more like this, please consider supporting me over Patreon. More support there makes it easier for me to justify the time in doing these over the normal gameplays I usually churn out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next time.